A rustic clay oven. It may be hard to imagine, but this is Bauhaus. Futuristic worlds. This too is Bauhaus. As are these floating biofilms. How would Bauhaus look and work today? That's what we'll explore in this video. When people think of Bauhaus, they tend to think of straight lines, primary colors, steel, an unadorned look. More than 100 years ago, the German design school turned aesthetics on its head with its minimalism. But Bauhaus has always been more than that. It was about comprehensive learning and a return to tried and true traditions.
I think that in some way, the revolutionary teachings of the Bauhaus have to do with doing, learning by doing, but also with different worlds coming together.
A look forward to unknown realities with the latest technology.
We have new technologies to play with. We have new materials to play with. And how can we take these new technologies, continue the philosophy of the Bauhaus?
And we'll look at what Bauhaus could do better today. But to understand that, we first have to go back more than a century. The Bauhaus Art School in Eastern Germany stands for a new beginning and a fresh perspective during the Roaring Twenties.
The European traditions that had been taught at art academies up to that point no longer seemed suitable for the challenges of the present day.
Away from heavy furniture toward light, modifiable pieces that also reflect social changes, reflecting the feeling that many people had back then, that life was moving rapidly, that everything was changing every day.
Founded by Walter Gropius, the school attracted people like painters Wassily Kandinsky and Paul Klee, architect Mies van der Rohe, as well as textile designer Annie Albers and typographer Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. Starting in Weimar in 1919, these Bauhaus masters were the first to connect art, technology and craftsmanship in their teaching, bringing together progress and tradition.
Connecting these areas is very Bauhaus-like, that is, constantly transcending boundaries, not remaining within one's own boxes and categories, but always engaging with something that isn't from one's own fields of origin, thus constantly questioning one's own discipline, one's own thinking, one's own views, and one's own values.
Out of this experimental atmosphere emerged designs that today have iconic status, like the legendary lamps by Wilhelm Wagenfeld, or the steel pipe chair by Marcel Breuer.
The people who studied here came with the idea that something new was happening here, something different that was revolutionary.
But it was too revolutionary for conservative Weimar. In 1925, the school moved to Dessau, an emerging industrial city with hopes of finding inspiring cooperations. Here, Bauhaus was able to develop freely for 7 years and build according to the ideas of its creative minds, from a visionary school building, to residences for Bauhaus professors, to social solutions to the era's housing shortage. But Germany was growing hostile to free thinkers. The Nazis were taking power. Bauhaus left Dessau in 1932. It mounted one last defiant attempt in Berlin before finally closing in 1933 under political pressure. The visionary dream of the Bauhaus artists was over, but their minimalist design was to prevail worldwide. We see the legacy of Bauhaus ideas in a Swedish furniture maker, simple, functional, accessible to the masses. Apple combines technology and aesthetics in simple elegance, the concept of form following function in its purest expression. Tel Aviv's White City was built by German Jewish architects who had fled Nazi Germany. And a university in Nigeria shows how functional modernism can be combined with local identity. Bauhaus master Mies van der Rohe emigrated to the United States in 1938, carrying on the school's spirit and applying it to iconic designs like his Seagram building in New York. Chicago, the campus of Illinois Tech. Mies van der Rohe taught here, and it's where his largest design complex can be found worldwide. with Crown Hall at its heart.
So one of the things that the Bauhaus influence brought to the United States, especially this industrial belt, was a sort of appreciation of the materials of manufacture.
Anijo Matthew is the dean of the school's Institute of Design, which is a direct intellectual descendant of the Bauhaus school. Here, Bauhaus master Laszlo Moholy-Nagy founded the new Bauhaus in the late 1930s. It was experimental, interdisciplinary, industrial, and of course fascinated by technology.
So you will see Mies van der Rohe and Moholy-Nagy and some of the other masters who were here at that time said, we don't need ornamentation. The material, the technology of manufacture can itself be beautiful. And how can we highlight that?
In 2018 came the Kaplan Institute, a modern response to Crown Hall. Architect John Ronan adapted the Bauhaus concepts for the 21st century.
In a sense, John is echoing some of the core principles of what Mies wanted to do with that building in this building. He took the external boundaries and reinvented this with new technology, ETFE, which is a Teflon-like material. It's an inflatable that's all around the building. And he created sort of this canvas for design students to showcase their work. So the building is all white and it is designed so that the work of the students shine rather than the building itself becoming a monument.
The work of the students in this case is data design. More than a century ago, the Industrial Revolution changed the world. Today, digitalization is turning everything on its head. Artificial intelligence, virtual reality, robotics, not simply using these technologies, but shaping them creatively and with a critical view. That's the Bauhaus of today.
For us, the interpretation of the Bauhaus heritage comes from this idea that in the past, the masters experimented with the technology of their times. It is incumbent on us to experiment with the materials of our times and shape it and form it so that it can be used in ways that are appropriate for human society, for human beings, users, and so on.
Today, it's virtual spaces that are being created. Sylvia Kim designs transition spaces for online learning in virtual reality. For effective learning, people need buffer zones to process what they've learned and gather strength to take in new information.
In digital and virtual space, when you wear the goggle, the headset, VR headset, after 1 second you are in a different space. So there is no really time for you to take preparation or review or reflect anything, but you're just there. So we are lacking transitions, and that's when I wanted to, okay, so there is a gap, how should we design it?
At the same time, we have courses that are focused on ethics and politics of design and what impact can designers have on complex problems, right? So like climate change or healthcare or food insecurities and governance and policy. So this juxtaposition of radical new thinking around technologies while also grounding our students in the philosophies of what is the impact of their work. Just because we can build something, should we build it?
Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. This is the home of South America's oldest design school, the ESG. It's also an offshoot of Bauhaus, founded in 1962 by two students of Bauhaus graduate Max Bill. At ESG, they reflect on the values of previous cultures. Here we'll soon see what cooking food in a clay oven has to do with Bauhaus. At this school, there is close collaboration with indigenous anthropologists, artists, and chefs.
This project brings together indigenous women and women from religious communities who preserve recipes from their grandmothers, food memories, but also memories of sustainability.
The cuisine of traditions, provoking thought by reflecting on past approaches.
I think the idea of experimentation is very much alive today. not only in design and art, but also in science and in these encounters between different areas of knowledge. This sense that experimental practice broadens our world is very close to what we find in the principles of Bauhaus.
The food is prepared in a clay oven, built from an ancient material traditionally used by indigenous people in harmony with nature.
We always try to do that. It's about using what nature has to offer without damaging it. There are techniques that we, the indigenous people of the Tejeros, do not master. And there are techniques that we do master, but which are unknown to the academic world. That is why I believe that this exchange greatly increases knowledge.
Knowledge and techniques from several centuries. That fascinated Bauhaus masters and their students 100 years ago.
The historic Bauhaus took an early interest in the indigenous weavers of the Andes region. Ani Albers was one of the leading figures in the weaving workshop, who always said from the outset, "Weaving is an ancient tradition, and my teachers are the Andean weavers in Peru."
This pioneer of experimental weaving brought together traditional techniques and modern industrial materials.
There's such a resonant interest in non-European cultures, in indigenous knowledge, which basically opened up something that societies that were extremely influenced by industrialization, and still are, had lost.
Back to Dessau, where the idea of sustainability has now prompted a step back from some of the former euphoria around modernism. The Bauhaus school building is a masterpiece, but
we realize that all the materials that were praised as a new beginning at the time actually have a very problematic background. Back then, no one asked where the electricity came from, which coal mines were behind it. No one cared where the sand came from that formed the basis for all that glass. This means that there's a certain degree of critical distance, because today we're painfully aware of the consequences associated with it, in terms of damage to biorhythms, the environment, and resources.
So, what might Bauhaus do differently today? Experimenting with architecture, biology, and design on the search for materials to help protect the Earth's resources. An exhibition in the Bauhaus Museum shows how biofilms become building materials. Delicate membranes, 100% sustainable. Nature as teacher.
Essentially, this exhibition demonstrates what it means for architects when they no longer take existing material from outside and shape it into something, but instead become part of the organic growth process of these microorganisms themselves.
Bauhaus is still alive today. At the time, the Nazis could not even begin to understand the school's ingenious designs, denouncing them as un-German, Bolshevik, and soulless. They destroyed every revolutionary idea. The bombs of World War II destroyed the school building. There's strong opposition today, too, from the German far-right AfD party. In its rejection of the Bauhaus, it does not shy away from drawing parallels to the Nazis.
It's very striking that the wording is very similar. The terminology is very reminiscent of the past. And I don't think that's a coincidence. The first campaign by the AfD directed against the Bauhaus had the headline, "The Misguided Path of Modernism."
The misguided path of modernism was the term coined by Bauhaus adversary Paul Schulze-Naumburg in his racially ideological treatise Art and Race.
Now there is this latest campaign with the slogan, "Think German." Think German comes from Adolf Hitler's Reichenbach speech in 1938. These are no coincidences, which is why we believe that there is a deliberate link between the past and the present that poses a challenge for us.
Challenging times for the Bauhaus, then as now. Fortunately, its open-minded spirit and love of experimentation live on. The Bauhaus story is far from over.